existence exists. And the act of grasping that statement implies two corollary axioms: that something exists, which one perceives, and that one exists possessing consciousness, consciousness being the faculty of perceiving that which exists. Ayn Rand. Reality is that which, when you stop believing it, doesn't go away. Philip K. Dick. These are quotes that express a realist view of reality. So reality has a mind-independent existence. Now, this is very similar to the belief in objective reality, but the belief in objective reality is a specific claim within the broader context of realism, but both emphasizing the consistency and independence of reality from a subjective perspective. In simple terms, this cup exists whether or not there's anyone here to perceive it. So now, when I perceive this cup, what is actually happening? Well, there's different explanations for this, but I am receiving information in different ways using my senses. So I see the cup. I can feel the cup. I can smell the cup. I can taste the cup. I can even hear the cup. Now, these seem to all match up because there's actually a cup that I'm perceiving. Now, they all match up here, but we can think of times when they don't match up. So perhaps I see a cup and I think it's made of glass. So when I pick it up, I'm surprised that it's plastic, so it's much lighter. Or we can think of times when we've seen food where what it looks like and what it tastes is very different. Or so I see where people make these beautiful cakes that can be many different things, where it looks like it's fried chicken or it looks like it's a hamburger. But when you actually bite into it, it's cake. So it seems like usually there is a hierarchy of perceptions. Usually sight is at the top. Seeing is believing. But sometimes what we see can be incorrect. So what do? That's when we try to feel it. And like an example with the glass, touch will then supersede what we see. But it also depends on the situation. So again, when talking about food, touch is not important. Maybe smell is more important, but what's most important is taste. And we can see that if you had food that looks terrible but tastes great, or smells terrible, like some Italian cheeses, but tastes great. We see that taste in that situation is the most important. All right, now today, for the senses, I want to focus on sight and touch or feel. And so, and continuing with the cup. Now I'm holding it up, but let's say I'm not touching it and I'm just looking at it. Okay, well, I see what it is. And now already, I mean, there's also thoughts saying it's a cup. And I have the experience of what that is. But if I look at it, I can see it's shiny. And now I'm going to think that maybe that makes the material porcelain. It could be plastic, but it's not going to be wood. It's cylindrical in shape. There's no coffee in it, so probably cool. And I could also guess about the weight of it. Now, if I feel it, well, yeah, it feels cylindrical. It's cool. It feels like, I know I did the sound, but it feels like porcelain. The weight is correct. They match up. Well, we think it matches up because the cup is pointing to a real cup. So it looks cylindrical. It feels cylindrical because it is cylindrical. The senses agree because it's a real cup. Now, in the late 17th century, Irish philosopher William Molyneux came up with a thought experiment. In that he posed the question, if a person born blind were to suddenly gain sight, would that person be able to visually recognize and distinguish objects previously only known by touch? So they had felt a cup, they know what a cup is, but they've never seen it. So now they see the cup for the first time. Can they match the feel with the sight of it? Well, since he posed that question, there have been opportunities to actually test that out. And they've always found or gotten the same results. subjects have struggled to connect objects perceived through both senses. So what they see and what they feel. And actually the correlation being only marginally better than random guessing. So basically, they can't connect the two. This is very interesting. And what does this say about our perceptions? And what does it say about reality? Now, I made this thought experiment, or well, not thought experiment, I made this experiment to explore sight and sound. Well, this is something that I noticed just one time when I was in the bath. And so for this, you're going to need a bathtub, or a big sink, or a pool. This has to be deep enough so that you can go in, or where you can put your hands in the water and have your hands up and not breaking the surface. And have your eye as close to the surface as possible. Now, a deep bath works great. A shallower bath might work, but you might have to kind of move around a little bit. Now, a sink can work, but you're going to have to, again, get your hands in and have your head down as close as you can to the surface. Pool is okay, just so long the water is quite calm so that you can see your hands clearly. All right? So let's try it. Okay, so put your hands in the water and have your fingers facing up and have your head as close to the surface as you can. And then just keep your eyes open and notice how your fingers feel. And move them around. Really pay attention to how that feels. And with one hand, you can touch the finger on the other hand. Go along the finger, you can squeeze it, whatever you want to experiment with, just to really pay attention to that feeling of it. Okay? Then what I want you to do is move your hands so that they are now facing each other like this. And so now we see the fingers look long and thin. The same thing. How does that feel? Move them around. And the same as before. With one hand, feel the finger on the other hand. And just pay attention to how that feels. With both, the hand feeling and the hand being felt. How does that feel? Anything feel strange? Anything out of place? And now, even you can switch between the two. And as you switch, what do you notice about the feeling? Does it feel like it's short here? And then it seems to switch to a feeling of being long? Now, you can do this as many times as you want and do it as long as you want. So how was it? What did you notice? How did that feel when you had your fingers up and they were short, fingers to the side and were long? And when you switched, did you notice anything, any difference and change? Now, this is something that I didn't come up as an experiment. It was just something that I noticed one night while in the bath. And what was interesting to me was how it felt. So when my fingers were up and they looked short, it felt correct. So if I had moved my hands out of water and now they were short, it would have felt fine. Or my fingers were long and I took them out of the water and now they're long, it would have felt okay. Now, it's not that they felt short and they felt long, is that they felt correct. And why this was interesting is that if we think of the hand as a physical object, which it is, with being independent of the mind. Like my hand is here and I numb my arm so I have no feeling of it. We still think in a realist view, it's still there. Whether or not I perceive it or not, it's still there. So it's the same thing. This is a physical object. So if it's the case, then there should be a different experience with what we did in the experiment. So there was an illusion, but it was a visual illusion, and it was due to the refraction of light. So it distorted the fingers so that they were short and then they looked longer. But that's a visual illusion. So what I should have had is that my fingers look short, but they feel regular length. Or they look long, but they feel regular length. But that wasn't the case. Instead, what it was is it felt correct. It seemed like they matched up. Now, doesn't that go against the whole Molyneux problem? Where they had the sight and the touch of the object couldn't match up. But actually, it's exactly the same. But what we see is those people who gain their sight, at first it doesn't match up, but over time it will match up. Because what they're doing is actually constructing the connection. The idea is that they connect because it's actually a real cup. I see the cup because that's what there is to see. I touch the cup because that's what it is to touch. They match up because they're both correct. That's why they match up. But actually what we see is no, they don't. They have to be constructed. They have to be learned to match up. Now this makes sense that our senses match up because it's just good for evolutionary reasons. For survival, it's necessary. It helps us better navigate this world. But what we see is that that agreement is constructed. Now I like this because it shows that the feeling is very open and very accepting. And so when I change my fingers, kind of like, okay, I guess the fingers are short now. That's how it is. Oh, okay, fingers are long now. Okay, that's how it is. Now you could use virtual reality and really distort your hands, make the fingers extremely long, and that would feel correct. Make your hands look old and feeble, and that would feel correct. Now you can make your hands look diseased, and that would feel correct. And what's interesting to think about is if you had those goggles on all the time and you had these diseased, sick hands, how long would it be, do you think, before they started actually feeling sick? Before you actually felt pain in the hands? This is interesting to me because it points to and shows that the feeling of the eye and how you can distort it, you can change it, but it still feels, it's me. It's still me. Now, I've talked about this before in a previous video on dreams, how in dreams, I've been a completely different person. Physically, I've been different. One dream, I was a woman. Had different thoughts, different goals, different history, different families, but it's still me. That me, that me-ness, that I-ness is open to everything. You change, well, again, in other videos I've talked about how in your life, how much you've changed. This body has changed. My likes and dislikes have changed, but it's still me. So now when I see this person, and obviously if the person is a tall person, I'm short. And I think, well, if I were tall, it would feel tall. No, it would feel like this. If I were a short person, it would feel like this. You see that person with completely different thoughts, completely different everything. If you were that person, it would feel like this. It just leads to a very open view of what reality is. Now, does this prove anything? No. What would it even mean to prove something like that? But what it is something to just notice. And all these experiments are something just to notice things that perhaps you never noticed before. Maybe start to question things that you just took for granted. And mostly just to have fun with experimenting with our experience of reality. Okay, I'd love to know what you think. If you've tried this experiment, anything else you noticed, something I didn't talk about, leave that in the comment section below. Until next time.